I confidently said that I would break into the mafioso's house under the guise of a maid, but the cops at the station just laughed at that. I recently graduated from the police academy and I thought that thanks to the red diploma, I would be put on the most difficult investigations, but all I did in the squad was run to buy donuts for the cops. However, today the chief told about the theft of a diamond necklace, in which the main criminal of the city was involved. And I immediately decided to show these guys who was the coolest here. The case would be mine. The cops kept laughing at me, but the chief thought about it. I was new to the city, which meant that the mafia did not know about me. And he gave me the job. Everyone was in shock, and I was happy. This was my chance to prove myself. I had been waiting for it for so long. At the station, I was given a walkie-talkie and a pendant with a built-in camera. An hour later, I was standing at the right house. I was met by a security guard who looked me over in disbelief and then led me to the boss, Mr. Batista. I could feel a cold sweat breaking out on my back. Our prime suspect was standing in front of me. Even though I had fake references, I was still worried that I would be discovered. The mafioso stared at my pendant for a long time. If he saw the camera, I was screwed. My heart was pounding like crazy. But all Batista said that it suited my pretty face and that he was willing to hire me. He immediately decided to give me a mini tour of the house, but as soon as I reached his office, the mafioso said that it was strictly forbidden to enter there. Only he had the keys. What was he hiding? At night, while everyone was asleep, I crept to the mafioso's bedroom and carefully opened the door, but it suddenly creaked. Damn. I hope no one heard. I peeked cautiously into the room. Batista was snoring in his bed. I crept carefully to the bedside table and ran my hand over it. Here they were, these keys. I grabbed them sharply. Suddenly, the mafioso's hand reached out for me. I had already said goodbye to my life, but then I noticed the thread. The keys were tied to Batista's wrist. What if he woke up? The seconds dragged by unbearably long. And then the snoring began again. I exhaled and carefully unhooked the keys from his hand. I was walking out of the bedroom in total darkness when a guard suddenly appeared in the hallway. He was coming in my direction. I quickly hid behind a corner, hoping that I wouldn't be noticed. But then the guard turned down the stairs. It turned out okay. I immediately rushed to the office and opened the door. When inside, I turned on the flashlight and looked around. Nothing unusual. Suddenly, the room was pierced by the creak of the door. Someone was standing in the doorway, but I couldn't see his face because of the darkness. Then he started coming at me. I wasn't told in the academy what to do if you were caught red-handed in a mafioso's house. Then he suddenly said my name and hugged me. Hey! What's going on? What? Princess didn't recognize? He smiled. I could see him closer now. It was Sean, my high school crush. Before graduation, he suddenly flew abroad without warning me. I was in a lot of pain then. Sean asked me gently what I was doing here, since I graduated from the police academy, not the maid school. I tensed. What if he was the mafioso's agent? But Sean said he knew I was a cop. How? But he went on. Sean said he could finally explain everything to me. It turned out that he left the country because of his father's order. Order? Couldn't he say no? Sean hesitated for a moment, then admitted that his father was the head of the mafia and that he just couldn't cross him. It was dangerous to argue with him. The son of the mafioso? I was speechless. Sean led on. He was tired of his father's orders. He wanted to live a normal life. That's why he wanted to help me arrest his father. Then I heard footsteps and Sean said we should leave. We would talk tomorrow. I couldn't sleep all night, and I thought about Sean. After his departure, I could not get over it for a long time, and I imagined what our first meeting would be like. It was incredible that it happened under such circumstances. In the morning, I was woken up by a call from the chief. Through the camera and the pendant, they heard our conversation with Sean. The chief said that the affair was getting in the way, and he wanted to suspend me. Damn, but Sean and I hadn't had anything to do with each other in a long time. There was a tense silence on the other end. Please, give me a chance. The chief sighed heavily. Okay, one slip and I would be carrying donuts to the cops forever. The next day, I was cleaning the front hall of the house when Sean came over and handed me a box of my favorite candy. I was touched, but he suddenly asked if I was busy on the weekend. Sean, I'm definitely not up to this right now, but I'll try to do something if I find out where Sean's father might have hidden the necklace. Sean thought about it, but said that there was a safe in his father's office, only it was hidden behind one of the paintings. We immediately went to the office, but the guard was standing there. Heck! I was scared, but I reminded myself, you have a red diploma from the police academy. You can do anything. Then I went to the guard and told him that I needed to clean the office. But he just gave me a contemptuous look and said to get lost. heck? And what should I do? And suddenly Sean, who knew nothing about police tricks, approached the guard. He was going to ruin us. But Sean started talking about football while pushing me toward the door. The guard was so engrossed in the conversation that he didn't even notice me. I slipped inside cautiously. The safe was indeed behind a painting. All I had to do was to remember the instructions for hacking. But the reality was more complicated. And as I dialed the numbers over and over, I was already desperate. But the green light finally came on. It worked! With trembling hands, I pulled the velvet box out of the safe and couldn't believe my eyes. There was the necklace inside. Then Sean came running up to me. He called out that his father was coming up to the office. We needed to run fast. The heavy footsteps of the mafioso could already be heard on the stairs. Then Sean opened the window and told me to jump. I dropped the necklace in surprise, but it was too late. We jumped off. This was a complete failure. Through the camera independent, the chief saw how I screwed up. Now I was going to carry donuts and coffee to the cops for the rest of my life. I was not a cop. I was an errand girl who missed out on the most important investigation in her career. We didn't land very well and I burst into tears. Sean began to calm me down. He was so sincere, as if in school. When I fell in physical education, we hid in the courtyard. Looks like everyone in the house was already looking for us. Soon, there was a commotion from the parking lot. We looked around the corner. The mafioso was getting in the car, and in his hands, he was holding the fairy velvet box. We thought he wanted to hide it away. We needed to catch up with them before Batista hides it. Sean, you're going to help me, right? And then Sean looked me in the eye, saying that he was willing to take the risk, but on one condition. If everything works out, I'll go on a date with him. There was no time to think. Yes, Sean, I'll go on a date with you. Just do something. Within a couple of minutes, we were chasing the mafioso's car. My heart was pounding. Sometimes it felt like we'd missed them. But Sean was good at maneuvering. We continued the chase. They stopped at the dilapidated building and went inside. Sean and I followed quietly. Crouching in the rubble, I pointed the camera independent at the mafioso, and then he took a necklace out of his suitcase. My throat was dry from the stain, and not that. At the same time, a strong hand from one of the guards grabbed my shoulder. We were taken to the mafioso, but he still laughed at the startled expressions on Sean's and my faces. He said that it was a test for his son, and I was suspicious from the very beginning. I had to save Sean and me somehow. I fumbled for the walkie-talkie in my pocket to give the coordinates to the chief, but it was noticed by the security guard. He took the walkie-talkie out of my pocket and threw it against the wall. The mafioso told him to do the same to us. It was the end. My whole not-so-long life flashed before my eyes. I don't want to die, but suddenly a megaphone was heard in the distance. Everyone stop! Police! I saw the chief among the policemen. How glad I was. When he came up to me, I asked, "Did the walkie-talkie work?" And he said that he was worried about me and watched the video from the pendant throughout the investigation. So he knew where we were going. I thanked him sincerely, and in return, he praised me and thoughtfully said that I reminded him of his daughter. I was persistent, but needed to be watched. A couple of weeks later, the mafioso was put on trial. When the jury handed down the verdict, I heard a round of applause. It took me a while to realize that they were addressed to me. I proved to everyone that I was a real cop. Suddenly, I noticed Sean. He came up to me and reminded me of our agreement. Wow, because of what happened, I forgot about the date, but I gladly agreed. After all, it was Sean who helped me cope. I spent a whole evening choosing an outfit just like in school. Why was I so excited? Had I never forgotten Sean in all these years? We were sitting at his house when suddenly he took out a velvet box from under the seat. Did Sean get me a present? He opened it, but there was the same diamond necklace. What was happening? It was supposed to be at the station. Sean said that he would never let the stupid cops take the necklace. And now the police had a fake. It turned out that he had long wanted to take the throne of the head of the mafia. But his father did not give in. Then I came along and helped him. With a grin, he said that I would now be his queen. It was like I froze. It can't be, so he used me. Sean suddenly grabbed me and bared his teeth. He growled that we'd broken up once, but it wouldn't happen again. I tried to pull away, but Sean was stronger. I should have played along with him. I forced a smile and said that being a queen wasn't so bad. At that moment, I snatched the necklace out of his hand. Sean was taken aback, and without thinking, I broke the window and jumped out into the street. I'd hurt my leg badly, and it was unbearably painful to walk, but I knew I couldn't stop. Sean would chase me with the last of my strength. I climbed into my car and slammed on the gas. I still couldn't believe that the bastard had betrayed me. I drove for a long time without looking back and then turned off the road into the woods. With shaking hands, I dialed the chief and immediately told him about the necklace. But he interrupted me. They didn't have anything against Sean. No one would believe me. How could this be? The excitement made it hard to breathe. I put my hand on my chest. That's right, the pendant! After completing the investigation, I forgot to return it. And the camera was working in it all this time. I started the engine abruptly. All I had to do was get to the police station. And how did the story end? One of the students asked me. Well, thanks to this case, I'm now one of the chief detectives of the police. I have dozens of high-profile investigations solved on my account. The students of the police academy looked at me with admiration, and then someone from the back of the desk quietly asked what the main advice I would give for the future was. I thought about it for a while, but I answered firmly. After that investigation, I know for sure that you need to believe in your dream and go to the end despite all the obstacles, and then everything will work out. This college canteen is mind-blowing. I filled a whole tray of food and turned to leave, but immediately bumped into someone. No way. Judy Harrison. She's the one who put my father in jail. The plates crashed to the floor. It all started that morning when my mom decided to drop me off for my first class at college. We were on our way and suddenly Dad's favorite song started playing. I was so sad that he wasn't with us right now. I offered to visit him, but Mom was against it, said that she hadn't forgiven him yet. Are you serious? There's nothing to forgive. Mom was always too hard on my father. Out of resentment, I stamped the car door and walked to college. I thought about how my mother often didn't understand me. My dad shared all my hobbies, including my love for technology. He's the only reason I got into this college. But for 3 years, Dad has been rotting in prison for nothing. And all because of this Judy Harrison. She accused my father of molesting her. Dad denied everything. Of course, he couldn't do that. She just set him up, but the jury didn't believe him. But they believed Judy's tear-stained face. And now my dad will spend 10 years behind bars. How can I accept this? All these years, I've longed for justice. So I was standing in front of Judy in the college cafeteria. The shock made the words stick in my throat. And I shout out into the hall. Charlie, my friend, caught up with me. I told him everything, barely able to contain my anger. I was angry with myself for not telling Harrison everything right away, but then I realized it was for the best. I don't think she recognized me. This was my chance to get Judy to tell the truth to the police. By the end of the day in college, I had a plan in mind getting this Judy out. First, Charlie would hit on her and gain her trust, and then lure her to a secluded place. There she would tell the whole truth. An abandoned construction site nearby was perfect for this. Charlie refused, so I had to push him. Well, his strict mother still didn't know how bikers stole his money, or whose cigarettes she found under the sofa. I had to cover for Charlie all the time. What did he do for me? After these arguments, Charlie gave up. The game started. We agreed that he would try to get Judy to talk. He would sit down and ask for help with his homework. I needed him to pick her up and ask her out. However, Harrison only explained the tasks to him and then ran away under any pretext. So, I told Charlie to change his tactics, to tell her more personal stories to ingratiate himself with her, and it worked. They gradually grew closer, but Judy did not agree to dates. We had to take a risk. Charlie climbed up to her on the 4th floor with a huge bouquet and begged her to give him a chance. Otherwise, he would jump. At this point, Harrison could not resist and agreed to go with Charlie to the construction site to watch the sunset. Yes! For 2 months, while Charlie was getting close to Judy, I worked through every point of the plan and completely gave up on studying. In parallel, I collected the necessary props for the abandoned construction. I bought a second-hand loudspeaker, printed out photos from the investigation, and made a real prison out of the abandoned building. It took a lot of time to install speakers and cameras all over the construction site. My dad taught me how to deal with technology. I called Charlie the day before, and we discussed all the details. And he said he'd be there if anything happened. I could have sworn that Judy Harrison would remember this date for the rest of her life. When they came, I was already in the excavator's cab, where my laptop was receiving images from every camera on the construction site. I could direct the entire show. Pale Charlie ushered Judy in, locked the door, and disappeared. "Charlie, what's going on?" was all she could say. "Ha, now you'll find out." I gave her instructions over the loudspeaker in the warder's distorted voice while I watched her from the control room. "Judy Harrison, the truth hall is waiting for you." She jumped up in surprise. Harrison lunged for the iron door, but it was locked. She backed away from the passageway and ran down the hall. Judy looked around in confusion. Photos of Eden prisoners were plastered on the walls, and terrible screams were coming from the speakers. In parallel, I conducted an interrogation about the events of that evening. She didn't answer me, just staggered on in silence, a grimace of fear on her face. So, she reached the climax. Prison. It was a decorated room with skulls where a wooden box stood alone in the center. "You have been found guilty of libel against Henry Chapman," I concluded, "and you will be punished as you deserve. Come to the box now." Then the gate behind her slammed shut, and the room filled with blood-red light. Harrison turned pale. "Please let me out," she screamed. "I'm claustrophobic." I was silent for a few minutes while Harrison howled. Finally, she went to the box and took out a prison uniform with her tag on it. "You take the rap. 10 years. By this time, I had come down from my hiding place and out to Judy. "I'm Henry Chapman's daughter, and you lied about his good name, and now you're not leaving here until you agreed to tell the police." Harrison suddenly began to choke. She turned white and fainted. It couldn't be worse. I was furious, but I didn't want her to check out here. I had to help her up and literally drag her out into the hall. Suddenly, with a deft movement, she snatched the radio from me and pushed me aside with all her strength. I just caught a glimpse of Judy pulling the lever with a sly smile. A huge ball on a chain whizzed past me and knocked down the walls. The floor broke and I fell down somewhere. What kind of joke is this? I landed on soft backs and there was a rustling and squeaking sound around me. Oh God, rats! It was useless to call for help. Charlie was in the other wing. Then I heard Harrison yell that she knew everything. Judy knew our plan from somewhere. Now it's my turn to do the quest. She hissed sarcastically. What a stinker. How did I fall for her tricks? Imagine coming back from a party with your brother. Harrison whispered ominously. You must be thinking, which brother am I talking about? You don't have one. But I have. More precisely, what's left of it. Harrison's voice broke and I felt uneasy. So it's late evening. You two go together. And then the car crashes at us. Suddenly, I was blinded by a bright flash. The spotlight hit me right in the face. A drunk driver hits your brother at full speed. Fred was in intensive care. Doctors fought for his life for several days. And then they said that he would always be disabled. My brother had to forget about his career as an athlete. Judy said with pain. I want to show you something. Harrison approached me and handed me the photo. It showed the black Jeep with the license plate ABC 4530. Oh my God! Dad, I could not resist and began to cry. The police didn't believe me. Harrison continued. He got out of it. He found people who allegedly saw his car in another place and the photo was recognized as fake. Then I decided to sort it out myself. She took a picture of Dad while he was alone and made some dirt out of it. This time, cops believed her because she managed to think it all out. Time seemed to have stopped. Harrison didn't say anything, but I just stood there, clutching the photo. You're lying. I screamed and lunged for her.
It was going to be a fight, but Charlie came running and pulled me away. It turned out that he had long suspected something was wrong, but could not get through the rebel. He asked me to calm down. The hell with it. This hypocrite didn't dare slander my father. Harrison stared at me, then turned and left without a word. I didn't expect this. I went to jail right after that damn construction site. I told my dad what I had heard, word for word, and waited with bated breath for his answer. Come on, tell me. But he was silent, his head bowed. So it happened like this. My vision went dark. I was hoping that my father would refute everything, but all he said was that it was a difficult period in his life. How could he deceive me? I don't remember how I left or how long I wandered the streets. I hated everyone, deciding not to go home. I went to the construction site and stayed there until nightfall. That's where she found me, Judy. She said she was just trying to get justice, of course. I returned the favor. I felt sorry for her brother, but I didn't know how to help. After the conversation, we both felt better. The next day, I looked for Charlie. However, in college, I immediately got to the principal. It turned out that I failed the test, and at this rate, I could lose the scholarship. I was so ashamed that with this stupid revenge, I completely gave up on my studies. I also felt guilty about Charlie. I noticed that he liked Harrison, but he was literally torn between us. Well, I told him, since Judy and I had made up, I didn't mind him hitting on her. I realized how important it was to be able to forgive, especially if you were loved. Yes, it's not easy for me to accept my father's lies, but I have to meet him again and try to make things right. And I need to explain everything to my mother. Maybe now she can forgive him. After all, he only has us now. I'm a psychic. My gift is to heal with my hands. But this time, the client was special, Bill White. He wanted to get rid of the memories that tormented him terribly. I touched him, but suddenly, everything went dark. At that moment, a strange vision came to me. Someone is approaching my mom. She runs to the stairs, wants to go down. And then, I saw that my mom was lying on the steps unconscious. And up there was Bill White, my client. The vision ended in a bright flash, and I went blind. Panicked, I called out to him, but all I heard was the door slam. He ran away. I was terrified. It was pitch black, and I couldn't even make out the outlines of objects. And the last thing I saw was my mom's murder. What happened? Everyone in town knew I could heal, but I've never had a vision. I just helped people get rid of their pain. And that's all. Although my own pain hasn't gone away for years, it was different. For as long as I can remember, I have been tormented by the question, who is responsible for the death of my mom? It happened when I was 6. I only vaguely remembered crying over my mom's body, and then the policeman took me to the orphanage. After a few years of living in the orphanage, I realized I had a gift. At first, I healed children in the orphanage, and after graduation, I was given an apartment. There I received patients. Those who were recovering told each other about it, and people began to come to me from all over the city. Apparently, Bill White came to me the same way, and it seems that in our session, I discovered the ability to see the past. Perhaps Bill knew something about my mom's murder. I was trying to figure out how to find him. All I remembered about him was a mole above his upper lip, just like mine. Then I thought of Matt, the cop I helped with a terrible migraine. I should call him. But it was difficult to move by touch. I was constantly dropping something or hitting the corners of the furniture. There was darkness everywhere. Finally, I found my phone by touch and went to contacts from memory. I started calling everyone and finally heard Matt's voice on the phone. It worked. I told him about the strange client and my vision on my mom's death. But Matt said that he was suspended from the service and no longer engaged in investigations. At that moment, all my hopes were dashed. I had no one else to turn to. An hour passed, 2 hours, and all of a sudden, Matt called me back. He said that he had thought it over and was ready to help. And he had his reasons. Matt said that when he was working as a detective, his wife was killed. He tried to find the culprit himself, collected evidence, and found the address of the person. But in the end, he didn't have time to arrest him. The killer committed suicide. After that, Matt couldn't do business like he used to, and he retired. Every killer must be punished. Matt finished. An hour later, he was at my house. Matt asked for my laptop to hack into the police database. After a long search, we found the street where Bill White lived. Matt was trying to get the house number. But suddenly, the system blocked us. Heck, at least we had a lead. In the evening, we reached the outskirts of the city. We had to look for White here. We went to all the houses on the street. No one heard of Bill. We were already going back. Then Matt noticed the house with boarded up windows. We got closer and went up to the porch. And suddenly, I felt dizzy. I grabbed a railing and the vision came to me again. Fake images appeared and I realized that Bill White was definitely here. We had to get inside the house. Matt kept saying that there was a patrol running around the area and if we got caught, we'd be arrested for breaking and entering. But I said that I would go alone or with him. I would get into this house. Matt sighed heavily and agreed. With a terrible crash, he broke off a couple of boards at the entrance to the house. I froze. Did someone hear us? We quickly went inside. I asked Matt to stay close while I read White's energy. I felt the walls and the remaining furniture in the rooms and hoped that another vision would come to me. Suddenly, Matt stopped. He said that there was a photo on the wall. There's a man with a girl. She looks like you. Matt chuckled. He took the picture down from the wall. And I picked it up. Another flash. A vision. Someone gives me a toy and then I heard a car drive up to the house with the siren on. Let's go, Matt whispered to me. And a second later, there was a terrible crash as the cops broke into the house. I hesitated, but Matt grabbed my arm. And we ran as fast as we could. I heard the cop chasing us, but at the last moment, Matt pushed him away and we ran out of the house. I was exhausted, but Matt said we couldn't stop. Only when we were far enough away did he call a taxi. All the way, I clutched that picture in my hands, but the vision didn't appear. I asked Matt to describe the man in the photo. White cheekbones, a mole near the lips, Matt said. It was Bill White. I remembered that he had the same mole as me. I asked Matt to take the photo to the station and find out something about White. Who was this girl? Maybe she would give us another clue. Matt said he wasn't welcome at the police station, but he'd try to do something. Matt didn't answer his phone the next day, and it wasn't until late afternoon that he called. It turned out that he was detained, and he was in the police station. He was turned in by the same cop who ran after us. Matt said he would only be released on bail. Hell, I was the one who put him where he used to put criminals. I had to help him. I groped my way to the locker where I kept my savings and took out all the money. I hoped that would be enough. With difficulty, I got out of the house and went to the sound of cars on the highway. I had never hitched a ride blindly before. Finally, some guy took pity and agreed to give me a ride. When Matt was released, I told him I couldn't ask for his help anymore. If he got caught again, he could be sent to prison. But Matt said that we would see this through. Together, he swore on his police honor that he would not back down. Oh, Matt. He also said that while he was in the police station, he found out something. The man in the photo was really Bill White. Matt hesitated a little. He sighed heavily and said that Bill was my father. No way. So the girl in the photo with him was me? Resentment seethed inside me. How could he leave me? I was beginning to think that White had something to do with my mom's death. Why else would he run away after she was killed? The next morning, we drove to one of the poor neighborhoods where White might be. Matt talked to the beggars, but no one knew anything. We were about to leave. But then a ragamuffin said he knew White. For a couple of dollars, he told us that this strange White recently lived in an abandoned building. And then I felt he was right. White was very close. I followed my gut. Matt and I went down to the basement of a house. and the feeling grew stronger. White was here. I called his name and immediately heard quick footsteps. White decided to run away again. Police! Freeze! Matt shouted and ran after Bill. Matt quickly caught up with him. I heard him push Bill to the floor and then the handcuffs clicked. Bill was breathing heavily and no longer struggling. Then Matt began the interrogation. White admitted that all his life he was tormented by a conscience for what he did to his wife. He hoped that the psychic would help him get rid of the heartache, but I felt bad, and he was afraid. We were fighting. I pushed my wife and she fell down the stairs. White said painfully. I still hate myself for running away. For leaving my daughter. I tried to find her, but without success. I'd like to know how is she now. White finished. I was shaking and couldn't speak. But in the end, I decided. Bill, I'm the girl you left behind. I'm your daughter. There was a tense silence. A moment later, Bill burst into tears and begged for forgiveness. Tears began to run down my cheeks too, and I realized that I bared no grudge against Bill. And suddenly, I've got my sight back. Unbelievable! Seeing the world again was a miracle. And I realized that as soon as I forgave my father, my illness went away. It's like I've been given a second chance to make things right. I didn't know what to do next. Matt was waiting for me to call the cops because my dad had actually killed my mom. But I wasn't in a hurry to get my phone out. All my life I've wanted to punish a murderer, but do I want it now?